Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I'm going to talk about crisis communications, and I'd like to welcome to the show Jeff Chatterton, who is a crisis communication strategist, keynote speaker, and co-author of the book Leaders Under Fire, which actually, Jeff, you and I talked about the first time you were on the show. So welcome back.
It's always good to be here, buddy.
Great. There was recently an article posted on mondac.com that talked about the first hour of crisis communications, and I thought right away I've got to get Jeff on the show to talk about this. So, Jeff, what should be happening in the first hour when something happens or perceived to be
Uh,
happening?
um, can I answer that with what shouldn't be happening?
Sure.
Which is you shouldn't be trying to get more information. There's no problem with more information coming in, but where most corporations, where most organizations screw up is trying to understand what's going on. Um, and that is where there is no substitute for speed. The what is the expression? The A lie goes three times around the world while the truth is busy putting on its shoes. And In the meantime, every second that you wait from communicating, even if you don't know what's going on, even if you don't have all the information, you are losing your credibility by the minute, because someone is going to fill in those gaps. And if it's not you, you're not going to like what they're going to say. So, yeah. The number one piece of advice I have for corporations in the first 60 minutes is don't make perfect the enemy of good. Sometimes good enough really does have to be good enough. You have to get out there and communicate.
Is it acceptable to say that you don't know the full story? Like, because a lot of times
100%.
I've heard that
Absolutely.
never say you don't know something. Well, you can't know everything. So is that okay to say?
So I'll give you an example. The model I tell people is lead with what you do know, and chances are good you know more than you think you know. I work with a lot of arenas and public venues and stadiums, and so two fans have attacked each other at tonight's hockey game. Um, Police have been called, and we're going to have a further update at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Right? That's the who, the what, the when, and the where. Um, where you're going to get into trouble is not the who, what, when, and where, but you can feed the beast. You can start to feed that beast. It's the how and the why. How did fans get guns past your security? How come security didn't jump in faster? Those are the questions that you are panicking about, that you don't want to talk about and you don't want to have to answer, but you can get the basics out there and buy yourself some time. So the model I tell people: tell them what you do know, tell them openly what you don't know, and then where you can go for more information. You saw it in 9/11. Rudolph Giuliani, back before he was, evil and part of the, the Trump question.
Mm.
Rudolph Giuliani was a hugely credible leader because of how he handled 9/11. And for the first 3 days after 9/11, all he did was, here is what we do know. World Trade Center 6 and 7 are down. 4 and 5 are injured beyond repair. World Trade Center 2, because there was other multiple buildings there that people forget about. Um, Here's the list of known decedents where next of kin have been notified. Here's a list of known survivors. It's available on this website. If you would like to add your name to that list, please go to this website and add your name to the list so people know that you are okay. We don't know, obviously, who did this. We don't know how many people are still inside. We don't know this was going on. I will be back in 1 hour. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's where you can go for more information. And Which is, I'll be back in an hour. And that's all he did for the first 3 days, and still they had an idea of what was going on.
Is that approach helpful to stop rumor and conjecture out there? because you're coming right
Oh
out
yeah.
and saying what you don't know, but what you're working on to try and get answers to. So does that approach help
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
in other ways? Okay.
It positions you in the leadership space. I mean, yeah, frankly, you're gonna get some awful questions. You're gonna get some hard questions that you're not gonna like. The fact that you don't have all the information is on a scale of 1 to 10, about a 2, for what you're gonna deal with in the next, 72 hours. Get this out of the way. Just own it. Um, Show that you're human, show that you're real, show that we're still trying to gather information. The last thing we want to do is speculate, but this is what we can tell you. uh,
Should organizations ignore things on social media when their name crops up somewhere, or should they respond to it immediately? Because I've had conversations and guests on the show where sometimes an organization or a person gets mentioned or comments on something, and 3 days later it's a crisis, but they could have done something within that's like our show, the first hour to stop it from ever escalating. So is there something that organizations should maybe have prepared right away as soon as they get wind or see something that their name is cropping up on a tweet or something?
I'll give you my favorite consultant answer, which is that depends. Right. So I am always going to err in favor of communicating. I think very rarely can you get into trouble from communicating. There is a case to be had, and I've seen it happen where, for example, someone posts a video complaining about your customer service levels or complaining about something that your organization has done, and it has 11 views, right? Do you need to weigh in? No. Do I think you need to monitor that and pay attention to what people are saying and be prepared to step in? 100%. But there's a phenomenon called the Streisand effect, where sometimes just drawing attention to the problem actually makes it worse. Do you know the Streisand story?
I don't think so.
Do you want me to tell you? You
Yeah,
want to
sure.
you want to hear
Yeah.
the Streisand story?
Yeah, let's hear that.
So Barbara Streisand, the singer, um, so she was upset because there was a geological survey from university students talking about shoreline erosion in California. It was an obscure technical report. It had some aerial photos of the California coastline, including amongst one of them her estate. Um, she was upset that her house got mentioned in this report as the cause of potential environmental harm along the environmental coastline, and sued the school and the students in an attempt to try to get her house removed, thus drawing way more attention to the whole issue than if she had just let the whole thing go. Right? It's called the Streisand effect.
Oh, look that up. I want to find out what happened.
Yeah.
With
You
moved.
can go find the obscure geological survey now. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at things a little differently. If there is obviously a well-known disaster or crisis that has occurred, what kind of things should have an organization have at the ready within that first hour? Because employees or people standing around have already
Yep.
sent texts and messages out all over the place,
Yep.
and like organizations
So
tend to do.
I had a client. It was a specialty aviation company in Las Vegas, and they had a massive fireball. That's never a good thing. I don't care what kind of aviation you're in. When things go boom, people go, oh crud, right? I got a call from the owner. He didn't know whether his staff were alive or dead. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't know what was going on. He's just in full on panic mode. But we did know that there were no passengers involved. That's relevant information. And because this is a mile off the Las Vegas Strip, we knew it wasn't a terrorism attack. This was a refueling incident gone awry, right? That's really, really relevant information because the last thing we want are people thinking, oh, Al Qaeda has struck the Las Vegas Strip. There's literally a mushroom cloud hanging in the air. Um, I put together the message. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's where you can go for more information, which is I'll be back in an hour and a half. And we hit the Las Vegas media. I was doing live television within 11 minutes of the time I got the phone call. I typically am never your best spokesperson. You should have someone from the company, but in that case, I was the best of the bad options that was available. Um, a week goes by. We put we invited the media to come back out. It was a hot air balloon company. Put some balloons up in the air and got hundreds of thousands of dollars in free exposure and stuff. And didn't lose a single dime in bookings because we were able to manage the narrative. This was an unfortunate refueling incident, had nothing to do with passenger safety, had nothing to do with terrorism or anything else. Everyone else is fine. Everyone is safe. We don't know the status of the pilot. Turns out the pilot was burned, but okay. So a week later, we brought him out, did some interviews, and did some stuff. It was it could have gone very, very differently, but we managed the narrative around it and grew the business.
Well, my last question then is why does why does it take organizations sometimes so long to respond? What is their issue? Why would you wait so long?
They're afraid. It's the tortoise effect. If we don't know the status of the pilot, we can't speak about what's happening and if anyone's got hurt because we don't know yet. We can't can we confirm that no passengers have been involved? Do we know that? Do we know for sure? Well, we don't know what happened exactly. We weren't there. All of these questions happen, and in the meantime, you have legal counsel who are screaming at you, "Don't say anything." If you can't say it, they can't use it against you in court. Um, That's really awful legal advice, frankly. I mean, it may be applicable in a law room court, but it doesn't work in the court of public opinion. And if you're in a public facing leadership position, there are multiple courtrooms at play. You're there are story after story after story about people who forget that there are multiple courtrooms out there, and as a result, they pay the price.
Yeah. I just always find it interesting how some organizations, if if they don't know one thing, won't communicate until they've got all the answers. But by the time they've got all the answers, the details have changed anyway. So,
Uh,
you're not helping
yeah,
yourself at all
they're
by
absolutely
waiting.
petrified of. So they're afraid, and they don't want to say the wrong thing, and it's an emotional response. It's understandable, but it's not the right response. The emotional response is to duck and cover and figure out what's going on. That's not, you're not really looking to find out what's going on. You're avoiding doing the ugly thing.
Yeah.
Wherein doing the ugly thing and sticking your neck out there and saying, we are aware of this, we know that there is a situation, we are working very hard to try to keep, determine exactly what has happened, is absolutely the right move. It's sad and it's shocking how many corporations don't do that. You can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
The Ottawa Public Transit had a bus crash. It took them 4 hours to acknowledge what bus route it was. Um, in the meantime, people who can't, get a hold of their loved ones are wondering, well, was that my husband on the bus?
Yeah.
Is my child on that bus that got here? And everything else like that. Whereas you could have come out and said, we are aware of an incident involving, whatever bus route 29 at the corner of this corner and this intersection. We will have more information for you, shortly. Solves a lot of problems, but they don't
Yeah.
do it.
Well, we've come to the end of the show. Jeff, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share on this critical first hour?
I'm sorry for speaking far too much. I could do this for far too long.
Well, that wasn't what I was expecting, but
Yes.
but thanks for sharing your time, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
You're good people, Alex. Keep up the excellent work, and look forward to watching more of your stuff.
And don't worry, you'll be back again to talk about this.
Cheers.
Take care.